Vai pure.
Grazie. I begin in Italian and then in English. Buonasera a tutti, benvenuti a questo nuovo appuntamento al nostro ciclo di videoconferenze internazionali sulla piattaforma Zoom, dedicato completamente ai tram e agli altri mezzi di trasporto. Questa sera è la volta del sistema di trasporto dell'isola di Man e sono sicuro che tutti apprezzerete particolarmente questa presentazione perché arriva veramente da un paradiso del trasporto storico ben noto in tutto il mondo. La presentazione sarà fatta in inglese, al termine della serata ci sarà spazio per domande in inglese o in italiano e potete usare anche la chat in inglese o in italiano in ogni momento durante la presentazione. Vi ricordo che il programma completo delle prossime presentazioni è disponibile sul nostro sito internet. Grazie. Adesso ripeto in inglese, poi do la parola al relatore di questa sera. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another appointment in the cycle of international video conferences on the Zoom platform, all dedicated to tramways and other means of public transport. Tonight, it's the turn of the Isle of Man transport system, and I'm sure you'll enjoy this presentation because it comes from a real historic transport paradise, well known worldwide. The talk will be done in English. At the end of the evening, there will be a space for any questions in English or in Italian, and you can also use the chat in English or in Italian every moment during the presentation. I remind you that a complete program of the forthcoming presentations is available, as always, on our internet site, English section, www.atts.to. Well, thank you for now, and the floor goes now to Ian Longworth. Please, Ian, it's up to you.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to my presentation this evening about transport on the Isle of Man. First of all, we need to establish where the Isle of Man is. We get mixed up a lot with the Isle of Wight. So we're between England, Ireland, Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales. And that's why things are often referred to here as the Seven Kingdoms. And those are the kingdoms you can see from the top of Snaefell, and the Kingdom of Heaven and the Kingdom of Man. And so the nearest landfall to us is actually Scotland. It's 19 miles away, but most of our connections are with England. It is an independent country. It's had its own parliament for 1,000 years, and we haven't left the European Union like the United Kingdom has, and that's simply because we've never been a member. So your fishing boats have never been welcomed here, and nothing's changed. The shape of the Isle of Man, to see it in its full glory, the Calf of Man at the south in the bottom is uninhabited. The hills, which become mountains in the south of the island, are on the left-hand side, the west coast here. There is a central valley between Douglas and Peel, then the mountains are in the middle here, and this is where Snaefell is, with the mountain tramway, which goes up from Laxey Bay to the east or to the right. And then the flat part of the island in the north is the bit that's arable. So we're capable of being self-sufficient for things like wheat, dairy products, meat. It's all very traditional farming, none of your EU subsidies to make it go any faster. So transport services, which I happen to be the director of, is part of the Isle of Man government. The Isle of Man government is split up into departments. The Department of Infrastructure does all the things that's obvious to do with infrastructure. And transport services, in total, there's 200,300 other government vehicles and plants, and the fleet I run is about 2,500 in total, with all the island's logistical support. So like setting up a vaccination program for COVID, all the logistics of that were done by the transport staff. Currently we're sorting out air services. And then the bit you're interested in at the bottom, Isle of Man transport. and the bit that's probably the bit that appeals to me has bus vanning with about 70 buses and 70 minibuses, and Isle of Man railways, the 4 of which 3 of them are really tramways, and we're going to talk about those tonight. We have not moved on. Just a moment. Okay, so in a pre-COVID situation, interestingly, post-COVID, we are now about between 92 and 98% of back to normal. That's really the difference is the school children who are suffering from COVID because they're all together so much. But generally, it's 3.5 million, 3.8 million by bus, 500,000 by rail. And I noticed the picture on the bottom right of Snaefell has already disappeared onto somebody else's backdrop tonight. And they obviously are the much more interesting aspects of life. I'm going to talk about the steam railway first, having given you just a bit more background. We've gone the wrong way, just a moment. This isn't going well. So when you look at the island, the calf is at the bottom left, the arable bit at the top right. What you'll immediately see is that the top is in a different colour. That's because most of that uses dial-a-ride for public transport outside school buses. We call it Connect Villages. You can see that as a result of where the hills are in the centre, there's no bus routes there and no public transport. So from Ramsey in the top right down to Douglas in the middle on the right, that's where the Manx Electric Railway is.
Ian,
yes.
Sorry to interrupt, but you haven't actually got onto the presentation. It is still showing the basic screen for the setup of the presentation.
Yes, we can see the slides running.
You should start the slideshow.
So what can you see now?
We can now see
Next screen.
it's showing multiple images, but of individual slides.
Right. So what can you see now? Can you see a bus map?
That's the bus map, yes, but we also see a thumbnail of the next slide and the whole of the thumbnails in a row at the bottom.
Something's gone wrong then, hasn't it?
Okay, now it's okay. No, not now.
No.
Before.
No, I was just starting it again. So we got the map top right now, and that's all you can see.
It has been okay for just a second beforehand.
No, we are still seeing a multiple view with the slide and the next slide and thumbnails at the bottom.
When we practiced half an hour ago, of course, it was perfect. But that's what things do, isn't it?
Oh, okay.
Slideshow.
Ian, please go to back on the first slide, possible to see.
The first slide.
Yes, thank you. And after the other to see.
You're seeing this is the relator screen where you see all the slides.
Yeah, I'm trying to swap it to the other one, but I'm not doing very well. We had it on it to start with.
Use a slideshow on the top.
Yeah, it won't let me get
displays. Swap displays. I can see swap displays on the top. Okay, now it's perfect. Okay, it's okay.
Okay.
No, come
again.
back.
No, once again, it's wrong.
Yeah, I've no idea what's gone wrong. Just a moment.
It has been okay for a while. When you did the slideshow, now it's okay. It's the first slide and it's perfect, the screen.
Yep.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Right. So let's try. Okay.
Yep.
Right. So the top of the island is Connect Villages. On the right, Ramsey down to Douglas in the middle is the Manx Electric Railway. It's 17.5 miles. It takes an hour and a quarter. On the TT on a motorbike, it takes 6 minutes. From Douglas then down to the bottom is Port Erin, 15.5 miles for the steam railway. The steam railway also went to Peel and then round the west coast to Ramsey, but not since 1968. We can do all sorts of fun things on the island. This is on the mountain, which is on the TT course. And we have 8 vintage buses in the fleet, and occasionally we get a chance to pose them with vintage cars and things. And that's one of the fun things we like to do. But we also, the traction enthusiasts from the UK aren't allowed to run road trains anymore. So we brought them over on the ferry and we lent them a steam engine and they did a trip around the island, which they found quite interesting. So anything that's a bit of fun, we're into. So into the heritage railways now, as they're called here, the tramways to you and me. You can see Ramsey, Laxey to Douglas to Derby Castle on the right, the Manx Electric Railway. The line off is that's 17.5 miles. It's 5 miles or 8 kilometres up the mountain to Snaefell. The Douglas Bay Horse Tramway link the two, and down at the bottom you've got the steam railway, which is 149 years old, whereas the MER is 1893, Horse Tramway is 1876, and the mountain's 1895. So the island was very rich in the 1880s and 1890s. We've got some very interesting things like the world's first escalator was here. There are lots of early photographs. And here's a picture of Caledonia, which is our number 15, which was number 4 in the Manx Northern Railway, with a Clemenson coach behind, which we've now got one that's been privately restored and is on our railway. So everything in there except the people still exists today. The original loco on the main one is Sutherland, which is 1873, and that ran at the 100 years of the railway, so we're not going to run it at the 150th. You can see that we have to take things to bits to do an awful lot of work to keep them going. You know, we find that someone hit a pile of snow in 1928 and bent the frame and no one's done anything about it, and all sorts of funny things like that. So here's one of the standard Bayer Peacocks number 4 in the process of going back together after overhaul. And there it is steaming earlier this year for the first time back in service. It is a major challenge because of the level of technology. So you can see the pony truck at the front. This now has roller bearings, but before that it had plain bearings with self-changing oil. And we use 5 gallons of oil a day, which was then distributed across the island by the engine. So we're gradually making improvements so that we're more environmental, if nothing else. But we try to do changes that people don't see. The loco, therefore, goes forward very well with a steering axle at the front. But of course, half the time it goes backwards with no steering axle, and that gives you a much rougher ride. A development of they intended to fit ponies at the back, but never did. They never had the money. And if you go on the remnants of the line from Valencia to Benidorm and Alicante, at the end of the northern section, which is now broad gauge, there is one of their meter gauge Bayer Peacocks, which is what the Isle of Man really wanted as a 242, and it's preserved outside the station. That's the starting point we often find. The railway had really, all the railways and tramways had been run down to the absolute minimum. And this is because of the way they were built and the way they were financed. And only the government only took them over as they went bust. So the steam railway went bust in 1967, effectively. And from a massive tourism, you know, once upon a time, 250,000 people would arrive by boat in the day at the peak season, whereas now we only have 320,000 visitors a year. So more and more things fell into dereliction. As we've increased the number of passengers we carry, we are effectively bringing stuff like that back from the dead. Asbestos is obviously an issue. So we built our own asbestos works, and here's 5 and 9 we'll have the asbestos done this year, and we've got that under control. So this is the frames for 11, which are upside down in this picture, and in this picture it's also going back together. But we find that effectively, when you strip these things down, they are effectively scrap, but they are very important museum pieces. And the effect of that is that you're going to hear who's ringing me now in the background. And we've had to do lots of rebuilding, lots of strengthening, lots of new parts in to make it worth restoring. We've also had the challenge of keeping boilers alive. And we've done a deal with the Severn Valley Railway, who have a boiler shop. And you can see that the boiler at the back is for a mainline steam loco, and the boiler at the front here is the first of our new boilers. And it's really quite challenging to get the design work done to make sure we get them right. But we're in the process of receiving 5 new boilers at the present time, which will effectively be an 8-year project. So here's 11 Maitland, which hasn't run for 20 years nearly. And that is now back in steam this last week or two. And you can see we've had new tanks made, we've overhauled the chassis, got a new boiler in it. And effectively, it's ex-works. And we've probably spent the best part of 400,000 on it. And there it is on its first day, being steam tested earlier this year without the dome on, so we can make adjustments and things. Our workshop is really modern. The extension's 100 years old. We still use all the Victorian techniques that you can imagine. The machinery is shaft driven. You want to take the wheels out the engine, you lift it up in this unfortunate way. This is to get the pony truck out and to do the bearings for a winter overhaul. It's 13 Maitland, 13, yes, it's 13 that. We have to take on apprentices who are doing their best. Just one second. These people are going to keep ringing if I don't just deal with this. Just one second. Hello, Ian Longworth. Hello, Terry. I can't take your call at the moment. Can I ring you back? Can I ring you late in a couple of hours? Ring you back. Thanks. Bye. People being persistent, never mind. So we have to train apprentices, etc., and it's all very challenging. But interestingly, there's a picture of 16. 16 Manning, you'll notice, is bigger and squarer than all the others. It's the last one built in the 20s for the island, and it's the most powerful loco. And that is actually in much better condition than some of the engines we're running. It ran once till the boiler expired, and hasn't run since the 60s. And at the moment, we have a secret project to bring that back for the 150th celebration next year. So at the 100th, we had number 1, the 150th, we're planning to have number 16. And this was taken 6 or 8 weeks ago and shows work on getting the frame back together and the first trial fitting of a water tank. So it's coming together. Another view of the other side. All very challenging, these projects. We also have diesel, which is an American-built diesel for backup. That's at Colby Station on the way to the south. We're using all the original coaching stock, and sometimes you take the panels off the side and as the director, I find it rather exciting to know how little there is. You can see there that the vehicle on the left there is 1873. It's the original coaches A1 and B1. When they were delivered as four-wheelers. And because they kept derailing, they put them on a frame and made them a bogie car. And we've now restored, and they were put together and called pest coaches then. And we stripped that one down to do an assessment, and we've now restored that. So the other one was F15, which you see there, which is a 1886 coach, and that's coming out of overhaul as well. So we're managing to save as much as we can. This is A1 and B1, and you can see it looks a lot better in that picture than the previous one, and that is now running. We also have 6 coaches that were built in 1905, which are corridor coaches, though they were a saloon originally. And we use, one of them was a royal and is in the museum, and the other 5 we run in the dining train. This is the director's saloon, which acts as the bar car in the dining train. There's a compartment I have 4 posh seats in for entertaining. There's a dozen seats for my serfs, and then of course my own private bar. And it runs well in the dining train. And there's the dining train, how we fit it out. We've got some with tables for 2, some for tables for 4. And we're doing about 10,000 meals a year served on the dining train, with all the protein cooked on the dining train, despite it being a 3-foot gauge railway. Anybody who gets a request for a kitchen extension at home, I can show them round the kitchen car of the dining train. We have up to 3 chefs on the train when we're doing a 7-course Michelin rated meal for 88 people. If we're doing pie and mash, it's 1 chef. It depends on the menu. We normally do a 3-course meal with 3 or 4 choices, and you order on the train. So quite challenging environment for the catering trade, but there's 2 of our chefs at work. We also have got a new bridge, which has been built this year. Of course, all the Manx skeet, as it's called, the rumours are the train wouldn't fit under it. So for those that are watching, there's the first train, which was Caledonia. You saw in the very first slide in the original state, towing the first train through the bridge to prove that everything fits. We've started also to do lots of infrastructure work, and you can see here where we're using long welded rail. In the bottom of the picture, you can see an oily mess, and that's one of the expansion joints. The cutting round there, this is at Mary Veg, where there were drainage issues. We spent £250,000 getting rid of the excess water and then rebuilding the infrastructure. So we're well on with that programme now. We're 10 years into a 15-year programme to sort that out. Now, these are 2 very interesting people. So that gives you a bit of background on the steam railway, just for general interest. This is Mr. and Mrs. Lightfoot, who came from Sheffield. And they were very important people because they built the horse tramway, the Douglas Bay Horse Tramway. That's at the bottom of what was Burns Hill and now is Summer Hill. And that house is there. The horse has probably been eaten by now and replaced by a younger one, and that tram we still have. So we're in a position where we just can appear in any age that we want with the horse tramway. 27 has recently been restored and is all ready to go. There's 27 during restoration. So we're taking them right back, and the ceiling has all been polished up, and new timber where it's rotten. So there, 18 was new to South Shields, and that one is the only double-decker that's left. We effectively have 9 service cars, 3 of each type, sunshades, toast racks and saloons, and then we have 4 museum cars. One's the Royal Tram, one's 18, the double-decker, one's 12, which is the only Starbuck car. We have all the others are Milnes, and the other one is 32, which is the only tram that's never been lengthened, which we'll look at shortly. So there's standard toast rack 20. We have 21, which has been restored. That's one of the sunshades. It's actually in the MER depot being done there. And as you can see, that's actually in the Manx Electric Railway depot where we do the work. But you can see that we've ended up with trams that look in a much better condition. So if you want to run transport in the Isle of Man, you also have to be a farmer. And here we are, we make our own haylage, straw, and other grass products. We've 168 acres of land, which we farm on, and I employ one farmer. And these are the most awkward employees we have. They have to be corrupted to get the best out of them. They particularly like carrots, apples, and polo mints. Polo mints, I don't know if you have those in Italy, but if you give them a low sugar one, they spit them out. They only have the real McCoy. And we have a stud of 30 horses. We have our own breeding program, and to make sure we keep the stud going. We have purebred Clydesdales, and we have Irish cross with a cob, Irish cob, and Shire horses. Shire horses generally just a bit on the big side, but we have one or two that have been bred smaller. We start off by training them in the fields on a long range start with, and then walking like this. And we eventually take them down on the beach to tow a sledge and then put them in a tram with additional reins on. So the skills of training horse trams is just there as it's always been. This is the blacksmith shop. I employ a farrier, and he's due to retire. So we have an apprentice farrier at the moment on a course, a 3-year course in England. And we have all the shoes in all the sizes and all the colours. And they're made up. A set of shoes lasts between 6 and 8 weeks, so you don't get a lot out of them. And you can see with the building that we still using one of the 3 original stables. The horse trams the horses used to live in stalls like this, where they can't turn around, they can't sit down or lie down, but these days they live in loose boxes so that they can have a better life. When they're going to work, we have to change the diet, and they live in the stables like this. And you'll notice they're very nosy because they think treats might be arriving. So as soon as somebody they know comes in, they'll stick their head out, say hello, and start begging. You've got to be dressed for work. These are the collars that they wear around the necks to tow a horse tram, and we found somebody to refurbish those for us. The collars are actually packed with straw, and that's how they're made. Some horses have blinkers and some don't. We find during training those that get distracted and those that don't. And there's William, all dressed for work. He's about halfway through his life. Generally, there's 2 of last year's foals. Generally, they live in the fields until they're about 4. By the time they're 5, we've had them working. The average retirement age is around 20. The oldest horse we've worked, Mark, was 24. Some go earlier. The Shires tend to go when they're 16, 18, but they live to the 40. So we have a charity that takes them when we finish with them, and people can go and visit them in their retirement home, which costs me a lot of money because the French offer me about £3,000 a horse for a lean horse, and I'm not allowed to sell them like that. I have to give them a retirement. The main depot at Strathallan at the northern end of the prom, you can see here we've demolished. The building was originally wooden framed, and they put offices on the top deck in the 1930s, and they started to fall down. And we discovered that the steelwork in the first floor didn't line up with steelwork in the ground floor, so it wasn't a surprise. And this is at the Derby Castle terminus of the Manx Electric Railway. So the ticket office on your left is a typical Manx Electric Railway ticket office, and the horse tram is behind. There's the portal frame of the replacement building that going up, and the pub beyond was once owned by the tramway, and there's inside the new building. So we put, originally the floor was mud, so we've put this mock sets in, and you can see that the low roof at the back is because the offices that were at the front are now at the back. And there's the horse trams outside. So we've gone back to the original 1902 facade, which has a traverser on the front for some of the roads. And there's many of the horse trams that have been restored, ready for action. And we've put nice lighting in at night so that it looks good at 2. So that's back to really as it originally was, very iconic. The promenade at the moment has been rebuilt for the first time since 1937. The original track was renewed then, and that progress is coming to an end now. We done 2/3 of it with double track, which should open for the Transport Festival of summer with a wing and a prayer and a following wind. It's been delayed basically by COVID. And the promenade, you could see, we've had internment camps here. We've had 3 series of them. We had the First World War, the Second World War, and during COVID. The camp split the promenade in half. So the guest houses and the hotels were commandeered to house internees, and they were allowed to walk on the land side of the prom. So prior to the rebuilding, you could see where the fence posts had been, because no money had been spent and nothing had been done. So we have a diesel electric tram, which started off as Mariah on the mountain for taking coal up, and then was brought down to work on the MER. And there I am on the first test run on the first section of the prom. And just to the right of the rear of the tram that's where the horse stables are. And we were just testing the first section to see how it went. So just to show that you can run an MER tram on the horse tramway, here's a horse tram on the Manx Electric Railway at Laxey Station, proving that we can move things around when it suits us for photographs. And again, you see the style of the booking office. That's in its 3rd location. It was originally further up the hill, and when they extended the Snaefell into the station in 2 phases, it gradually moved to its current location and is there today. We have several tramways that didn't survive. One of them that went through Upper Douglas was the cable tramway, and one of these trams is preserved and in the museum at Derby. But here's one on Bucks Road. When it was originally running, it ran till about 1930. And there's another picture on York Road, and 71 is a sister kite, 72 and that's preserved. And it's pity they just didn't last a bit longer, really. Snaefell Mountain Railway was 125 years old in 2020, and we didn't run because of COVID, so we lined up 3 trams outside the depot just to make the point. And there were one of the 2 trips that we ran to the summit in the centenary year, the 125th year, was to launch a set of stamps, and there we are on a nice day with Snaefell one at the summit. It's not always looked like, but there's the original building, and that didn't last very long, as you can tell. It's got, even there you can see there's guide ropes to hold it down. The maximum wind that we've experienced at the summit is 130 miles an hour, which is 160 and 50, 210 kilometers an hour. And we know that at around about 110 kilometers an hour, the grannies blow away like Mary Poppins, and we stop running at that speed, but the building has to survive that. The second building was this one, which had several incarnations and was actually a hotel with 6 rooms. The 3rd one, which is the current one, you can see there now. And this is a Spitfire from a film that we have, that when they'd finished on the film, we borrowed it, because we have an event island at war. And the farmer rang up to say the plane had crashed on the mountain, and did anyone know about it? It was actually is the wreck from the film that we use. It's actually made of plywood, but it was a bit of fun. And you can see even there the mist is around the aerials on the top. The aerials on the top are quite interesting. They were built to send out radio signals to guide planes across the Atlantic, was their original role. They sent a beam across for the planes to follow across to Newfoundland. And these days they're for the speech circuit of the air traffic control in the northwest of England comes out of those. And also lots of secret military stuff that we can't talk about. We run lots of events up Snaefell, and here's a gathering of 150 people for a Viking evening, and they're sending their wishes to the gods. Some old habits here die particularly slowly, and that was on Midsummer's evening, just as the sun set. You look at old pictures, and of course, and this is at the North Curve, it really hasn't changed, except you can notice that the ballast is very poor because they wouldn't pay for it. And here's a very old shop. We think that this is in the first 2 years of operation, 1895 or 6. And the reason is, if you go back, that tram there, you see has got windows in, and that tram hasn't. So when they were built new, all they had was curtains, no windows. They quickly fitted windows and then fitted a clear story roof. So we don't know who's in the picture, but it's at the original, the original terminus in Lancashire. All the power generated on the island was by steam turbines. The first power station was on the island, and that's the one halfway up Snaefell. They were converted to grid supplying through mercury arc rectifiers in the 30s, and then we are just finishing the last substation renewal now, and we'll have done them all. This is one of the original Snaefell bogies, and you can see at the front the fell rail. The fell system was developed by 2 engineers from the Lake District, father and son. Snaefell was the last one built. The first one of some of the early ones were Montagna from France into Italy, Brazil, New Zealand. And although we can see the Lake District from the top of Snaefell and their tramway remains, the museum to the fell, father and son, is actually at Featherstone in New Zealand, at the bottom of bottom of North Island, where one of their inclines was worked till the 50s. The other thing behind the Snaefell fell brake you can see is the original Mather and Platt open cage motors, which ran to the 70s. And in the 70s, they bought 10 trams when Arkham finished, which was the 1930s design built in 1950. And they modernized the electrics of the trams with that equipment. And what we found in 2010 was that our dear friends at Keeper took the parts out of the catalogue, and we're now looking at remotoring again with AC motors, but keeping the original, but we'll come on to that in a minute. I've talked about the weather on Snaefell and how challenging it is. This was after one storm, and you can see that there's been a bit of a washout, as they say, but when you looked further down, you can see the original earth return wire in the trench, and you can just see how deep the trench it dug out was, but we still opened on time after the winter. And you could actually lose people. It's so deep at that point that this was after one storm, and I think about 4 inches of rain that came down in an hour and a half or something. It's obviously a grisly job to go and put it right. Sometimes it's just foggy and wet, and we can only move things because it's a 1 in 12 hill. We can only move things in relatively small quantities. So there's our ballast wagon with a service tram, which is just then used to move it up. And other days it gets a bit cold up there when you're relaying track. That's just below the north shoulder. And you can see again that it's not the best of jobs. And when you go up in winter, we take the wire down at the top because of the amount of icing you can get. And as you see, considering we're only just over 2,000 feet above the summit, the winter weather can be quite bad. And we can't therefore operate in the winter months. Lurgy, which is about 1/3 up. And what we're doing here is to recover from the weather situation you saw. We put a temporary crossover in, which we now have as a permanent feature, and we can bring in and out of service. And that's the only flat bit of the line from the bottom to the top. We've done that to increase operational flexibility. We've also gone through periods of massive improvements in drains. Here's the original power station. You can see on the left, and the chimney was on the right. There's a base 4 poles down, and that was replaced by substations off the mains in the 30s. But this is all peat. The land is peat, and you can see scars in the peat because it's constantly moving. And every now and again, we have to cut it back from the edge of the tramway. So you can see again, we've had the landslip here, and there's some gabion work going on. And we relay the track and things when we do that at the same time. On Snaefell, we tend to use plastic sleepers these days. In a modern, everything, you can't go anywhere without a drone now, can you? And you can see here how we also put crosscuts in. The Isle of Man rules require you to accept any water from any of your neighbours, but you can distribute your water onwards to the neighbour downhill. And this is effectively what we're doing with a cross-cut drain here. We have a road railer to help us now. Because the mountain is ruling grade of 1 in 12, it's quite challenging to find equipment to use. And this is at the bungalow, which is 2/3 of the way up where the mountain road crosses and where the substation is now. A drone picture taken, that's Ramsey and the north of the island at the top of the picture. And you can see where we've got ballast retention, new track, the over at Newport. Renovation above the bungalow, and we're probably within 5 years of completing the project. And you can see that we're taking a very robust view of it. You can see here the drainage being prepared and put in, so there'll be no scouring of the mountain, and hopefully it'll stop moving the peat down while we do it. And you can see the other track's already been done. One of the problems is, of course, they only built 6 trams. You can't get anybody else. It's 3'6" gauge, and occasionally in summer, if the weather's nice, we can get rather demanding queues, and we just run and run and run. We can only dispatch a tram every 8 to 10 minutes, and that's following an accident in the 30s when 3 of them collided. And again, you can see how basic the construction is, and how we fairly have to take them apart sometimes to do major overhauls on them. But the whole structure, because they're so old, 1895, there really isn't a lot of structure or strength to them. And so what we do for that, you can see that discreetly inside, you can see a stainless steel frame is added, and that gives it more rigidity and a bit more strength for the equipment on the roof. So this is the restoration of number 1, which was done 7 years ago now. And there it is finished with the summit at the top. And you can see how it snakes round the mountain. So it comes up to the summit from the right, which is where you looked at to Ramsey. And it's gone all the way around on its 1 in 12 grade. Round, that's just north of the bungalow. And you can get some very, very dramatic pictures. The northern plains are beyond, so that's on the west side of the mountain. And you can see it really does look spectacular. And then this is going down from the bungalow down to Laxey, the bottom 2/3 of the line. So you can see the mast on the summit at the back. And this was a lead mining area. And so between here and Llandudno in North Wales, around 80 to 90% of the world's lead was mined. So there's a lot of poison land still now from that. This is just above the crossover. With car 2, there's car 2 having been repainted in an earlier livery as it's currently running today, looking smart. And again, you can see discreetly we've added a proper windscreen wiper to it, because when it's raining straight at you on the mountain or snowing, it's somewhat difficult to see. So we've tried to discreetly give the driver a bit of an addition. This is something else we've added. The Arkan cars had track brakes, which they didn't fit, and they rely on the fell brake, which is a bit not the best. It's a metal on metal interface, steel on steel. So what we've done, we've added a panic button, and we've put slipper brakes under the side, under the truck frame, so that we can actually, when there's low adhesion, we can get a proper grip to stop. And that's a modification we've made to all the trams. A truck been overhauled, and there under the tarpaulin is something to tease you, which we'll come back to. There's another view from the top looking at the west side and the hills. Gives you a good feel for it. That's the main reservoir for the island, which provides all our drinking water, and Peel is beyond the hills there. And on the horizon to the left, you can see the mountains of Morning Island. There's the temporary crossover, which is now available anytime we want. We just have to take the fell rail out, which has given us more operational flexibility when we have issues. And there's car 4 stripped down. And again, you can see how primitive the construction is. And now we have to brace the tram. You can see the bracing inside. There it is going back together. But in reality, we're going to have to come up with a better long-term solution. So under the tarpaulin was that. And that's a steel frame, which is much more likely to meet some vaguely more modern crashworthiness. And we're putting on it a wooden body round it, which is number 6, so that we've got a much more rigid structure, and there'll be a much less swaying, I'm afraid, when you go up. We're also modernising the trucks, so we're standing gear on. And we're putting air brakes on where you need air to take them off. The brake adjusters are there on the left in front of the truck. And 6 is our prototype, which should run next year. We also make our own, out of spare bits, we make our own works vehicles, but they have to have a fell brake on them, because the fell brake system on the passenger cars isn't sufficient to stop more weight. So you can see, even where we have a 1 truck thing for taking supplies up to the summit, it has to have a fell brake on, it has to have a brakesman on when it goes. So one of the other interesting things you can do at the top is actually end up above the clouds. So this was an evening dinner I went to up there. There's a couple of trams up. And you can see how we're actually above what we call the Cloak of Manannan. The Cloak of Manannan protects the island from invaders, because they can't find it because it's in a cloud. Here it is below where we are, which gives you a very, very spooky effect. There's a drone picture of the top looking south, and you can see the comparison with the clear day is phenomenal. And you can also get very interesting pictures. There's Laxey to your right, and you can see just the tramway going down the side of the hill, just to the bottom right of the picture. And you can get some very spooky scenes. At that point, when that picture was taken, 5 has got the Snaefell Mountain Tramway on the side in Manx, which I'm sure we won't go into. And that is the end of part 1. So we just now have to somehow find the other one, as they say. Just one moment. Can you see the one slide?
Yes.
Good.
Yes.
So the second part of the slideshow is all about really the Manx Electric Railway, which is probably the most interesting to most of you. We have our Hollywood sign, which at the end of the promenade, which was in a pretty precarious state. It fell out of use at one point. It was restored for 93 for the 100 years. It was pretty worn out. And so we've just been through a project to remove and put up new letters and new framing. And that's been recently completed and is now done. But when you have a Hollywood sign on the side of the hill, it's very challenging to access. So they had to have a crane above with men in it and a crane below taking the letters up and down to change it. So Derby Castle is the south end of the line. This picture is pre-1892 and shows the original Derby Castle attraction. In front of it, there is the creek, and that creek is where the depot is now. Beyond that, in the row of houses in the middle, slightly to the left of the picture, is where the horse tram picture was taken that I showed you earlier. And the stables are in the left-hand, top left picture. Is where the stables are and still are today. The Manx Electric Railway probably set a very important precedent in tramway construction, in the sense that the tramway company bought all the land and borrowed from, as it was, Dumbbell's Bank. Then the land was sold or rented out once the tramway was built for development. So that's the same as Mass Transit Railway of Hong Kong. It's the same of Crossrail in London, and I'm sure many other projects where the development profits from the development of the land are also used to pay back the loan to build the railway or tramway. Of course, Dumbbell Bank went bust in 1900. The horse tramway was given to Douglas Corporation in 1902. And it's probably is the reason that all this Victorian stuff has survived, is because there was no money to do anything about it. So this is the original Derby Castle depot. And the first thing you notice is that we stood outside the running shed looking down at the hospital road and the power station. And Derby Castle is to your left. The interesting thing is how low the other shed is, because when they dug the road out up the hill going up towards Port Jack, they dug out only what they needed, and that wasn't enough to make a level depot sign. To this day, we don't have a level depot sign. And of course, the trailer in the front is one of the original 1893 Ford trailers. And apart from the curtains missing, we're still running it in that same condition today. We've recently reclad that building and had to have special cladding made for the curved roof. And the power station building is still in use, but it's used as a workshop now. So inside that shed you've just seen, here's a picture, which must be before 1900. 3 was lost in the Laxey fire. Every time they ran out of money, they had a fire. So Laxey Station Hotel burnt down in 1917. Car sheds at Laxey burnt down in the early 30s. A couple of years later, the hotel at Doom burnt down. And it eventually went bust in 1957 and was bought by the government. So the car on the left, 6, was still running, which is one of the tunnel cars, and 1, 2 and 3 1 and 2 survive, and then the Guinness Book of Records of the oldest tram on their original tramway. To do the recladding exercise, we've been through 2 years of parts of the building having scaffolding in, as you can see here, trying to work and maintain trams. But it was important, there was an opportunity. It's over £1 million to reclad the 2 buildings, and they were just desperately in need. We had a gazebo from a do-it-yourself warehouse for them to work in to keep dry, and we had to get rid of things like that. So this is now looking at the back out to sea, and that you can see the curved roof shed on your left, reclad, and you can see the power station building all pointed up nicely and with a new roof on. Those buildings survive today and now look fit for purpose. The top shed was a wooden shed again. Here it is, looking somewhat derelict, and that was renewed in 1996. But sadly, they put green grey cladding on it, and it had rotted, and with electrolytic action, it had rotted away. So we've overhauled the building frame, and we've reclad that as well. So this is a very rare picture. The building on the left is finished, the original one. The building on the right is almost finished, and the electric railway sign, of course, is missing because it's all been done at a time. And then there we are, taking at the end of last year, the completed job with the electric railway sign done and the 2 buildings done. And of course, the drone picture is ever necessary, but you can now see the tramway passing there, the original power station building, the original curved roof building, the modern running shed towards the sea. And you can see exactly how it was fitted in to the creek that you saw. And then Derby Castle was where the derelict site is, to the right of the picture. So this is the inside the original building with the boiler house. And again, you can see the original switchgear and motor generators. And of course, there's one, they were replaced by mercury arc rectifiers, which that's the last one that was in service. And if you're interested, that's how it works. From the transformer, it's actually 6-phase, not 3-phase, to make it work. And effectively, the electricity comes in at the top, as you can see, as AC plus and minus, and it's in a vacuum, and the electricity jumps, which is why it sparks so much in the picture. In the previous picture, you can see the spark in it here in the middle. And effectively it then goes down the drain and goes out as DC. Very clever piece of kit. And effectively you replace all that with what you see in front of you now. This is in Derby Castle, and you can see an AC panel coming in, 2 rectifiers and a distribution board. So you replace a whole building with 3 cupboards basically. We have, as I said earlier, going through a renewal process. So this is the new Belarus substation, which is near halfway. There was a battery house at Groudle, that became a substation, but we couldn't find an earth return to it. It went through, there was a house between us and the tramway, and we just felt we were better turning it off and going away than admitting we wanted to put an earth lead across this gentleman's garden. So that's been replaced by this new building in a better location for the current traffic. So going back to a bit more history, this is taken from the Derby Castle station on your left. This has to be 1893, and the reason we say that is there's no trailers in sight. There's only 2 trams and they had 3. And whilst there's a passing loop in front of you here in front of Derby Castle, going up the hill is single track, and it was only single track for 1893. So we know, and you can see how they've cut out of the rock there going up the hill to put that rock as infill into the creek, which is the Derby Castle depot. So very, very significant picture. obviously, the trailers were actually delivered open and had a roof put on very, very quickly. But this is before 1897, because the trams got bow collectors, just like the Snaefell has to this day. But they didn't work in cold weather because the ears hadn't been developed to clamp the wire properly. So the wire was hung between poles, and they hoped that one of the two bow collectors would touch the dangling wire. And of course, when the wire went tight in winter, the bow collectors couldn't reach. So they very quickly changed over to a trolley wire when that had been invented. But Snaefell never changed because they had no money. And whilst many tramways used groove wire by 1910, they only introduced groove wire here in the overhead here when I got here. But that trailer still goes. The tunnel car in front still goes, and scenes have changed. And this is one of the early test runs with trailer 16, which is now trailer 30 something, and tram 3, which of course didn't survive. And that's taking a house drake on top of the hill. And again, at that point there, you can see it's single track. So it's during the test running right at the very beginning. But they suddenly found you needed a hat on because of all the grease that came off the wire. And that's why the roofs were fitted so very soon. And there's 51, which was interesting. If we go back and just look, you can see there's a bow on the top there for hanging the lantern at night. And when you look there, you can see when they put the roof on, you can see the original bow under this end of the roof. So it was very much a minimalist conversion, because effectively they just changed 2 stanchions on each side and bolted a roof on top. So they do wag a bit. Those of you who've got an Isle of Man calendar, this is a picture in it this year. There's a series of pictures. This is one. Very, very rare. There's only one type of tram that the MER's ever run that doesn't exist to run today. And that's these summer saloons, which again, they had 4 trams, 10, 11, 12 and 13, which had no windows, were open cars. And they didn't last that long at all. They'd certainly gone by 1906. And one survived as a cattle truck, which still exists, but all the rest were scrapped and none in passenger condition. So this is a very rare picture showing 12 and 13 in service. And the veranda behind was for the Horse Tramway. That got knocked down some considerable time ago as unsafe, sadly. And you can see the entrance to Derby Castle behind. And you'll notice there are Milton's plate frame trucks. And this is the picture in the calendar, which the other significance, so you've got a Sun Saloon as the second tram waiting to come down. But the tram on the left at the front is number 20 something, and it's got a headlight on, but you'll notice, and it's got a trolley plank on, but no trolley base. And what happened was that those were 4 of them were delivered as trailers, and they were motorized in between when they had a minute, and they then went on then to be motor cars. And you can tell because the traction wiring is all in trunking screwed to the outside of the tram. So again, 2 significant things in that old picture. This is at Groudle, which was the first terminus of the line, 11 minutes from Douglas. This is again, we think is 1893. The pub behind is still there. It's for sale if you want to buy it. But if you look closely, the 2 tracks go into one to the left of the picture, which suggests that was the stub end of the line. And they built the next extension the following year. So that's the passing loop at the end. And again, 2 motor cars, no trailers, and they didn't run trailers in the first season. Particularly. So again, it's very, very early picture. And the slide to the right of the picture, you can see an entrance to Groudle Glen, and that's still there as the entrance today. So this picture is before 1897, and again shows the Groudle Hotel. But you can see the track then goes on towards Ramsey. So it's between 1894 and 1897. And the tram again, number 9, which still exists today, it's our illuminated tram, was there with boat collectors on them. So when the extension was started, they took the picture of all the great and the good going on the first test ride. And the trailer 19, we put the number back on it, it's really 36. And we've recently restored that back to service. So we've put 19 on it so it can run this year with 19 on. And it's a tunnel car again at the front. And my engineering staff like posing. So the next picture is my engineering staff on a test run with one of the similar batch of trailers and one of the other 1 or 2 at the front of it. And they then pose for the picture to make sure that they equally are saved for prosperity for continuing to run the tramway. We think this is at the same is in the test run period, again 3 in a trailer, and this is looking down from the sea head, the head of the valley at the seaside, looking inland towards Snaefell. And compared with today, apart from being more built up, is the number of trees that are there, but quite a fascinating picture and obviously posed. And this is a picture of Laxey Station that we can't date accurately, but you can see the first building on the right, not the thatch roofs, which isn't a building. That's the Laxey Station building that's still there today. And beyond that is the Laxey Hotel, which we know burnt down in 1917. The trams have got bars on the Snaefell windows, and we're just not sure when they started to run like that. But it is quite an early picture. They've had several landslips and bits of building problems. There was a famous one at this point at Bulgram in the 70s, and this is on a previous one when the road was being built and the tracks were being realigned to bring them in off the edge. The most interesting thing beyond that roadworks is look at the top of the traction poles, how they've got extensions to carry feeder cables. And that's how Snaefell worked from the original power station. And we've not seen many pictures of sections of the MER with effectively the same electrical feeding system. But at that point, you're nearly 600 feet above sea level, and it's straight down the cliffs. And there it is today. This is taken when we were renewing the overhead. We will, the MER overhead renewal programme will be completed this next winter with 1/4 mile to do, and then we'll start to do Snaefell. Well, this is again at Bulgram, the cliff to the left, you can see, and you can see how the original tramway was further to the seaside, and it got brought over because of the lack of stability in the cliff. That's looking the other way back to Douglas. So where the wall is tight there, the gauge of the tramway was built for the original 1, 2 and 3, and then the tunnel cars, 4 to 9. Are quite narrow. They're based on horse tram type construction, and you can see the wall here. The winter saloons, the later cars, are wider. The 7'6" cars, and when you're driving them, you have the cab window open and you put your elbow out the window. By the time you've driven up Bulgram, you'll have no elbow. It's about 2.5 inches. What's that? About 70 millimeters between the tram and the wall. Very, very tight. On the line is the bridge going into Ramsey. It wasn't meant to be. The line was meant to hug the coast more, but they had problems with landslips. And interestingly, DEFRA, one of my colleague departments for fisheries and agriculture, owned the cliff at that point. And it's cost them £4 million to stabilise it. So the decision to stop building the original route and build a new route with the bridge was exactly the right one. This is a fairly old picture because there's still building material lying around. The river has been diverted. There's no trees, and obviously one of the winter saloons going across the bridge. We've refurbished that bridge. It's got 17,000 rivets in it. I think it was 6,000 or 7,000 were a bit loose, and we've renewed those, but we couldn't put a lot of equipment onto the bridge. So what we've done here, you can see, is we had to do it by hand, and it's actually two parallel bridges, and you can see it's built on longitudinal wooden beams. The principle of how the rails held up with the trough, so that if there's a derailment, that it's dealt with. The gradient then going up the hill is 1 in 24, which is the ruling grade on this one. So they didn't get to the original Ramsey terminus, so they built this at the plaza as a temporary terminus, which opened in 1898, and it's still there as a temporary terminus today. So the definition of temporary is, I'm not sure. So this is at Doom, where we're renewing the overhead. We have a homemade vehicle for doing that, and it's often pulled by a tractor. It is in action in Lucy after somebody pulled the overhead down. And again, it's on you'll see it's on Milne's plate frame trucks. Only 14 is running on plate frame trucks. Everything else is on more modern trucks. Because all the trams are at different heights, except those two there, because all the trucks have been swapped round so often. There's £100,000 worth of equipment that doesn't look value for money, but it's saved us a fortune. We now have a yard with our own rail bender, so we can make all the curved pieces of rail ourselves, which saves an awful lot of money, not only because of actually having the rail bent, but also the shipping costs of bent rail are so much higher, you get so little on a lorry. So that's one of my prize investments. This is going up out of Douglas Bay and shows the modern standard that we're laying rail to. We now, on the key sections, use concrete sleepers and clamp the rail down, whereas on the left you can see that the track rides on the sleeper and is dog spikes just nailed down. And the rail was originally all in 30-foot sections rather than 60-foot sections, because that's all they could get round some of the roads to deliver the rail. So interesting times. And we have some groove rail down as well. So you can see how we've laid that again on the concrete sleepers. We have 3 types of concrete sleeper. And the groove rail was from the failed Mersey Tram project. And we've also brought back thermic welding. Thermic welding was done right through to the end of the 70s. The 2 welders retired, so they saved money by burying the compound, which cost us a fortune then to get rid of, and using joints that they never maintained. So we've solved that problem now. This is at Groudle at the bridge, just beyond the pictures you saw of the restaurant and pub. And again, we've where we've done renewals, you can see we've dug out, we've put a membrane in, and we've done it to last rather than doing any temporary relaying. At some of the road crossings, we've used Edelon concrete sections so that we can use a lot less disruption, and we get the track then in a noise reduction compound around the track as well for going over the road crossings. This is one being put in at Eskerdale, so you can see the process of the aggregate packed and then covered in sand, and then very carefully the precast sections dropped into place. This is interesting. The drainage is so important, people forget, and so you can see the drain top going in there, and in places it was a dry stone wall buried that created a drain. Very interesting construction technique, presumably cheap. And that's going in, that's Eskerdale. Further up Eskerdale, you can see the process that we've adopted, and we weld then into long rail sections so that we get rid of as much joint maintenance as we can, and they're all on pads. This is towards halfway in the new substation, and you see the difficulty of accessing our railway, so the lay-by there on the road has become a works compound, and We will now groudle to halfway, which is a quarter of the MER's journey to Laxey. It will be of relay by next year. Douglas to Groudle, we're well on the way. That's about 2 years off. So we're going through, and you can see there we're painting traction poles at last. This is at Doon Quarry on the northern section between Laxey and Ramsey, and this shows you where we've got a works compound at the old quarry site. There were 2 quarries owned by the MER, and you can see that one tram's gone past at the top of the picture, and the other is reversing for single track working, because we use single track working quite a bit to make sure. So here we are at Doon, where we chose the opportunity in the low season to do some relay work, where we had some second-hand rail that was a bit rough and urgent. But we actually found that at that point, the crossing didn't line up with the straight, so we've ended up doing the crossing now. And you can see there, before we do the second ballast and tamp up, that it's a lot better job and a lot smoother and straighter when it's finished. And there's to prove what it looks like when it's finished. And the old track for the other direction still there. So it's quite a tight space to work in. This is going down from Ballagollery substation, going down to Ballaglass. And again, you can see that it's drainage work on the banking that's driven the decision to renew, because we've had so much flood water down there that the ballast has become choked. So again, you can see our little road rail team and the renewal going on. Ballaskeg, well on the way to Ramsey now, and we put a new crossing in. We get they're on plastic sleepers, and we get them manufactured. They're all the points works we put in are a standard 1 in 7, so we put them in as standard units now. But it's still about 80,000 for a set of crossovers like that. But it's important to maintain operational flexibility. And then this is further along, going from Luaig on the Luaig Strait, where again you can see that we've managed to do it. This is obviously taken from the Cabwin as driving. We can safely work alongside where it's difficult to access. This is the team for the 125th. You'll notice it says 125. So all the staff that worked on the centenary, the 125th day, posed for a picture, and there I am in black in the middle of it all, which was a fun day when we used everything that was serviceable in a parade. So we put all the number 1s together, the Snaefell, the MER, and the horse tramway there in Laxey Station, 3-foot-6 gauge on the right, 3-foot gauge on the left, and one of the old buses that we've got as well there. Where's 19 and the horse tram in the siding, and again the original building that you saw is still there and all alive, but we now got a better surface for people. So we do all sorts of silly things when we are enthusiast weeks. There's 3 a year. There's Easter weekend. The best one is the one at the end of July, and then we have an autumn one where we do things in the dark at the end of October. So this is towards Ramsey, and you can see we've had a parallel run, which is one of the things they like doing. And this is trams 1 and 2. We've restored the roofs. So since that picture, the first picture was taken, the last picture, you can see we've taken the roof off, and we've ever so carefully then restored all the quarter lights, and then put the roof back on, new planking where we needed it, and used as much as the original as possible. And you see the quarter lights on the seat on the right. So it's a constant process with the older trams of doing the work. And last I'm tempted to use, we tried to get original signing done. And this is number 2 being repainted, and it says it doesn't say Manx Electric Railway because that name didn't come to 1902. Douglas and Laxey Coastal Electric is the original name on the side of the tram, and it's that on some of the lampposts as well, where we supplied electricity. So this is an interesting picture at Laxey with the 4 remaining tunnel cars. The tunnel cars were numbered 4 to 9, and the significance of the picture there is that what survived was 5, 6, 7, and 9. So 3 of them have been renumbered to replace the cars that were burned in the 1930s. This is inside 7, the tunnel car 7, and again we've done a thorough restoration on that. You can see we'll put some bits of metal in the roof to strengthen it. They're called tunnel cars because they're so long and thin, and there's no internal support or anything like that, which causes them to twist a bit as you drive along. So there's 7 in service, and we believe that's the colour that they were delivered in originally, and we think it was Mills's dealer stock colour. And that's an 1894 car. That's going up to Housestrake. We do events with local people. So this was at Christmas before last, where the cafe at Doon Station, which is opposite where the hotel once was, said, you know, would like to do an event. Will you run the tram? So we ran the illuminated tram from Laxey to take people up to add to the atmosphere of the event. I'll tell you now the story of 14. A lot of the tracks were parked up derelict as the tourist numbers fell away. Benidorm had the attraction of new hotels with ensuite facilities and sunshine and everything else, and cheap air flights. And so once the 70s came and people wanted an ensuite bathroom, the Isle of Man fell away quite quickly, and lots of trams were parked up. 14 is the oldest toast rack, and that was parked in Ramsey sometime in the mid-70s. So for the 125th, we thought we'd try and restore one of them, and we had the wherewithal to do it, but you can see it's painted white and cream and red and all sorts there. And the challenge was what year we took it back to. And I favoured the 1920s because that meant all we had to do was rub down the paint and paint it. The local enthusiasts would be better look with varnish as new. And I said, well, if you provide the labour to do the stripping of the paint, then I'll let you do it. So I got the best part of the deal because they spent nearly 2,000 hours in stripping the wood back to the original and finding how good a condition it was in. And you can see there, it's going back together, and one of the management trainees is spending some volunteer time helping to paint then, having done the varnish work. So as you can see, it looks quite a different appearance with the amount of varnish wood there was. And the underframe was in good condition. So we were able to bring it back. The trucks were stripped down. No plate frame trucks, motor trucks running, they'd all been parked up. And it was correct that it should have motorized plate frame trucks. So we rebuilt a set of those. And here's the team starting to put it back together. No, strip it down, looking at that picture. Strip it down, all encouraged along. This is a copy of what's on my Bolton tram that runs at Blackpool, and this is called a peacock system for the brakes, which gives you mechanical advantage on the handbrakes. All the handbrakes on the Manx Electric Railway tramway have no mechanical advantage. It's a straight winding job, and it depends how strong you are, how soon you'll stop. The Bolton car had this mechanical advantage. So we borrowed the bits and we put that onto 14, because 14 is the only handbrake tram running. All the others are air braked. And we thought it would be a driver's challenge if we didn't do that. It's running the electrics of the MER is like running an Amstrad computer in the modern world. they're generally K12 controllers now. We have some K11s. They originally had K10s, which are only a 2-motor truck, and all our trams have got 4 motors. The arc shields and things like that are very, very poor. And we have had to learn to be able to overhaul and refurbish these and get things like the brass segments made. So we have a stock, and this is 14s being worked on. And there's the reversing barrel as well. And you can just see how primitive it is. And there's the framework. On the right, you can see 2 knife switches at the bottom of the controller. And they are the motor cutouts. There's nothing normally these days. The motor cutouts are mounted, well, by 1901 probably. They were mounted on the outside of the controller, whereas here our drivers have a procedure to go through and remove the front of the controller so that the knife switches can be operated, which is a bit on the dangerous side. So there's the first test run. All the engineers getting out for their picture taken for posterity, or with their specially dirty overalls on to show how busy they've been. And that's at just coming into Derby Castle, because of course the first test run then started to include driver training. I seem to have been the only one that had ever driven a real handbrake tram. And interestingly, when we got it down to Ramsey and we had to bring it part way by road, they accidentally turned it round, and they were proposing to have a winch and tow it onto a trailer, drive the trailer down the promenade back, and then winch it off. And they wanted to close the Manx Electric to do that. So I said, don't be silly. I said, I'll drive it on. So I actually drove it on, and they were so shocked that you could drive a tram onto a road vehicle like that, that they dashed off to take a picture rather than watching the wheels, which I'd have preferred them to do. So if there's anything stupid like that to do, they always ask me to do it. And then at the end, when it was finished, as you can see there in Laxey Station, all those volunteers and the staff that had worked on the car had the first ride when it was serviceable, and they all got a certificate to thank them for their involvement with the project. So that's everybody that was involved in donating the 2,000 hours to do the woodwork, and then my team who did the electrical and mechanical work. That allowed us then, 16 is the same batch of vehicles and was a runner, is a runner, but that's got air brakes on, and they changed the trucks on that many years ago. And that's just above Cornet. That picture's taken, and on an enthusiast evening when they were positioning them. And there's 14 running on. We do ultimate driving experiences where you can come and have a go at driving an MER tram. And that's Ian Longworth, who worked for British Rail at one point, and David Collister and myself going out on the UDE, going up to Dreamskerry with Ramsey in the background. And it looks rather splendid if I say it myself. We have 4 winter saloons, which are the backbone of the fleet. They're the first, they were 1898, and they're the first trams that are square in a modern shape with a modern strength of body. So they are our most robust vehicles. We only have 4 of them, and they do about 15,000 miles a year, which is 24,000 kilometers a year. So they work fairly hard for the money. And because we tow trailers, they're driven hard as well, because you have to drive them out of bends to stop the trailer stalling. So 19's there for a truck overhaul. 20, they're all in different liveries that are of appropriate periods. That's going down Bulgram. 21 is in that livery they chose after nationalisation in 1957. And we try and keep one in that colour, but I have to say it looks awful. And they did it deliberately because of the 4 winter saloons. I prefer to drive 21. It has the best ride of them all, in my view. And it's a horse tram that's being done on the right. And 22's on a lift there. 22 burnt out in the early 90s and is 3/4 of a replica body, and it's slightly heavier than the others. Therefore, I don't like driving that one because it's slower. But you can see 4 motor trucks of that age of fairly primitive stuff. That's what it looks like. It's a Brill 29 truck, and that's what it looks like stripped down. And you see how dirty and grubby they get. And we've discovered things like springs. We discovered the Spring Institute in Sheffield that helped us be able to get new springs of the right calibration and things like that. It's a constant trial. And there you are, there's one that's going back together, having been steam cleaned and fettled, and we have to do the hornways. Sometimes the trucks go out of square because they wear in the front corners. So again, we've done work on that. Compressors is an issue. Compressors is original ones are just unreliable. They got some from Marley and Taunton, which is that's one of those that came from Sheffield when Sheffield closed in 1960. We can still get those overhauled, but it's about £3,500 to £4,000 a compressor. Or we can put a modern inverter on the tram and go to Machine Mart and get a compressor for a few £100. And we've been prone to do that, but we're trying to keep one tram of each class as absolutely original as we can to make sure that that bit is preserved. And there's a modern compressor in the same frame. We just got to accept that running trams built between 1893 and 1906, you've got to have a compromise somewhere, because it's not a preserved tramway, it's never closed. The government bought it out of bankruptcy and it ran the next year in 1957, 64 years ago. And that, I think, is fairly unique. Perhaps Bramford's fairly similar, where the society bought it from the operating company and it kept going. But it's they are challenging. So there's one of the original armatures. We're starting to get to the point where I've had to have 1 or 2 new armatures made, but the com's being skimmed up in the lathe. So again, we take on apprentices and we have our own motor winder, although we tend not to do it these days. And you can see here that the pit has a dry stone wall and the floor is now concrete, but they jacked the tram up on mud before, so we've solved that problem. And the working conditions, really, they have to tolerate them. They're not, shall we say, but we've made as much improvement as we can. So there's a set of trucks where we've had to do more work. So you can see the hornways have been rebuilt, and we've got new bolts at the end, it looks like, and secondary suspensions in. So yes, there's a lot of work goes into this. There's a detailed picture. You can see the work that we've done to make sure the oil weighs in there and it all works well. And in some of them, we're starting now to trial roller bearings. There's one that we've tried there. Fit within the original axle box, a fake of the original axle box, so that it doesn't look any different to the outside world, as you can see there. So that's quite a successful conversion. And there's a set of trucks ready now to go back under 22. There are so many different styles of lettering, and again, we've now got tracings for most of them, and we have our skilled man that's doing that. That's one of the more complicated ones, that one. And there's 19 when he'd finished it, and you can see that's 1898 livery, Douglas and Ramsey Electric Tramway. And we've now got a trail of 42 is in the matching livery. What you tend to find is that trams have their regular trailers. So 7 has 48, 32 and 33 tow 62 and 61, 60 goes behind 16. Because everybody knows which coupling bar everyone, and we can paint them in matching liveries. And that's apparently been a tradition for a long time. So although that looks like a model, it's actually 21 now to repaint parked outside the depot. And you can see how the trolley head and the fixed head, short poles, and see how fundamentally basic the trolley base is, with a retaining wire on it. If they just bought some second-hand ones at any time from about 1910, I'd have felt pleased about it. because they have to be greased every single morning. And there's the workshop team again posing for a picture because they want to make sure that you all know that it's them involved in making it continue to run. And when I keep showing pictures of old people sat in lineups, and they insist that I share that with you. This is our next project. 28 to 31 were the last but one batch of tow tracks. 32 and 33 are 1906. I think these were 1902, and there's none of those in service. So 29 is our next project to get it back into serviceable condition. We're on with it at the minute. There's some bodywork being done, and again, it'll run on plate frame trucks, but we're going to fit air brakes to it to make sure it's usable. And there's our newest tram, 1906, 32 and 33. And that's parked outside Laxey. And there's 34 going the last highest motor car number, which of course Mariah, and that's showing it on the horse tramway. Again, to make a point, this is 36, which is now 19, which we showed you in an earlier picture. But the enthusiasts have done the bodywork on this, and we've done the mechanicals again. And you can see there that they've rubbed it back and found the original fleet number and chalked it out. If you look at the side of the roof, you can see that they've found there where the original transfers were and the lettering. And it's interesting, every conversion that they did to put a roof on is different. You notice this one has a pole on every seat to the roof, whereas the earlier conversions only had every other seat, but they were so rickety that they worked out that actually they needed to spend a bit more money, and they put much better bulkheads in, as you can see on this one, so that it's much more rigid. And there's 37, its sister tram in service with a very similar roof, but a matchboard dash. They're all different. 42's in for a change. What we have to do with the trailers, 40 series trailers are the most robust. This was in for overhaul, and we're beginning to get side frame rot on the chassis of these. So we've now got the technique to change the side frames, which is that what it was in for, Horse Tram 42 on the right. And that's now painted to match. And there you see that matches 19 that you saw earlier as a Douglas Bay Ramsey Electric Railway. And that's now running. That was in service yesterday when I went past. And here's another trailer coming along now. So our aim is to get the try and make sure we get every trailer back serviceable. And we're now within 3 of doing that. We expect one to enter service this year, another one next year. So we're well on now, so that we can then put lower mileage on individual ones. And there's 54 with the restoration finished. And that's got a combination of a full bulkhead, but only every other pole on the seat tops. So we have every combination of you can of roof added, and they're all different. People don't realise. That's at Laxey. 59 is the Royal trailer. We've only 3 enclosed trailers. 57 and 8 are full length trailers, and 59 is the short one. It was built as a 4-wheeler, as a director's saloon. It didn't ride very well, so they put it on bogies, and then it kept derailing for the following 100 years. Having discovered the Sheffield Institute for Springs, we weighed the axles, we sent all the calculations to them, and they gave us a specification of springs. We made new springs, and it now runs every day in the fleet as a runner, and we can use it without a derailment risk. They just got the spring rating wrong for the very short wheelbase. And this is how we get back to the depot. The motor car pushes the trailer uphill, and the conductor stands on the back and encourages the driver along. Stations along the line are interesting. This is Dreamskerry Station, which has just been restored and is almost like a little house. And when you come down, you have to give plenty of whistling to get them out of their cosy little cupboard to get them on the tram. So we're putting some effort in at the moment to make sure the station buildings survive while drying there. You notice the post box until not that long ago, the tram conductors were all postmen, and the post box is the tram last tram of the day as it passed. That no longer happens. But in that area, you can see shelters got the rats at the bottom, and you can see how all the windows are boarded up. and that's the intermediate stage where we started to restore stuff, and that shelter has now been done properly and finished, because the guy who lived in the White House to the left passed away, and he left us the money to restore the station in his will because he couldn't think of a better cause. So the Dogs Home lost out to us on that occasion. And we're drawing towards a close now. That's going down into Douglas from House Strait. The bay is just to the left of the tram, as you can see over the top. And you get some quite spectacular scenes in that period. The electric railway sign is working again, which looks really good. And of course, my other interest is the Bolton tram at Blackpool, and there it is in the illuminations there. That really is how I started off as a teenager working on the Bolton car to restore it. It went to Blackpool in 1981 for 6 to 8 weeks, and it's there 42 years later and still runs well. What is the great pity is that second generation tram of the early generation, it's 1901, so it's got a proper Dick controller with good insulation, good spark arresters, and it's on robust Brill 22E maximum traction track, and it's everything I'd just dream of having on the Isle of Man. So I did my apprenticeship on that, and then I had to go back a generation for the tramway that I currently work on. And really, that's about it. And are there any questions?